Right now, there are more than 700 California prisoners on death row, but no executions have taken place since 2006. And after this week's settlement, Governor Brown has agreed to adopt a new lethal injection method by this fall. Earlier today, Kent Scheidegger with the Criminal Justice Legal Foundation in Sacramento, the group that sued the state on behalf of violent crime victims and families, told KPBS why they sued.
Well, the state of California said 3 years ago now that they were going to adopt a new protocol that would meet the requirements, that would bring an end to this litigation so that executions could be resumed. And then just nothing happened for years. And it's not optional with the Department of Corrections. The Penal Code says they shall establish these standards. And so we brought a lawsuit to force them to do what the law requires them to do.
Now, joining me with what this could mean for state executions is my guest, Cal Western School of Law professor Alex Simpson, Associate Director also of the California Innocence Project. And Alex, does this settlement mean that executions are going to resume in California?
You know, I think that it's the death penalty has a lot of different facets to it, and the use of the lethal injection, the particular drugs that are being used, that's what the subject of this lawsuit was. That's the subject of a recent Supreme Court upcoming decision, but that's really just one facet of many challenges to California's death penalty. So even if this is resolved, there are many other hurdles before we have an effective death penalty in California.
Well, we also asked Kent when we were talking to him earlier if there's public will to actually continue executions in California after voters came very close to abolishing the death penalty in 2012. Here's his answer to that.
Well, close doesn't count. I mean, we had the vote, and the decision by the people of California was that we will keep the death penalty despite the problems. And so the path forward is to fix the problems. The problems are entirely fixable. The problems are artificially created by the opponents. And so what we need to do in the path forward is to fix the problems.
So Kent's identifying these problems. He's saying they're artificially created. Do you know what kind of problems he's talking about?
You know, there are some severe problems. It's hard to hear that the proponent of the death penalty would say that, you know, these problems are easily solvable. In reality, what you're talking about is structural problems with how the death penalty is both applied and how the process is carried out. There's a reason why we've only had 13 executions in the state of California, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that it is a very, very difficult thing to get right 100%. That's really what we want.
And the Innocence Project is involved in that, right? You tell us what you do.
So the Innocence Project only represents people who are not represented. Everybody on death row has an attorney, and so we intentionally make sure that if you are on death row that we can assist in some way if their attorney agrees to it. But I think the interesting thing is that we've seen over the last 30 years, there are people who are on death row who are innocent and have been proven to be innocent. And if you've got a track record that's not 100% effective, then the death penalty is a very scary proposition.
Getting back to the governor's changes, the administrative changes to this lethal injection, do you know anything about that as far as how that would change?
So the way that this lawsuit has been resolved is that the governor has agreed to say that if there is, with a resolution in this Oklahoma case, we will come up in a very short period of time with a lethal injection cocktail that can be effectively used here in California. And so whether or not that is actually proposed at the end of this plan, or whether or not that proposed injection cocktail is actually going to survive any legal challenges remains to be seen.
So you're talking about the U.S. Supreme Court decision that's due out by the end of this month on the Oklahoma case on the procedure, death penalty procedure, correct? So with that, the lawsuit, this particular lawsuit we just had here, and the federal ruling last year in California that said that the death penalty was unconstitutional because the person on death row didn't know if and when they would actually be executed. What kind of impact does that have on the future of executions, those three combined, or any one of them, on the likelihood that executions will continue in California?
Yeah, I mean, these are all effective challenges, or at least ones that really need to be resolved before we have a death penalty again in California. One of the ones that hasn't really been kind of discussed is that we have a huge backlog of people on death row who don't have attorneys representing them because there are so few attorneys who are able to represent a death penalty client. So we have the highest or the largest death row population in the world, and the reason for that is because we aren't able to process these cases effectively.
I see. We'll be watching it closely. Alex Simpson with California Innocence Project, thank you so much.
Thank you.